you.
Sarah,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for sharing your family history with us. And
Thank you.
I just wanted to know, there's a lot of people on that lawn. How big is the family?
That's a good question. I'm not even sure. I feel like every year when I go to the family reunion, I always meet someone new. Our family is, our family is definitely like we definitely have like over in the hundreds that attend that family reunion. It's a weekend, and also again, I just want to say this presentation that I do with my family. It's usually like 30, 45-minute presentation, so I really cut it down. I have a lot of other stories that I could add to it. Um, but yeah, it's a whole weekend of events. We've done cruises. The big main event is the picnic that we have every Sunday. There's a brunch. There's lots of events. It's like hundreds of people. It's a big. Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious more about the Rap Road community as well.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of how you organize, or how the community organizes your own issues, just want a little more information, like on how you end up going to, protest demolition of buildings, or how that comes about. Because I think it's a great example of how community organizes
Mm-hmm.
vice versa.
I want to say my mom is here today too, so she could probably add a little bit more. I've been a little out of touch since I've been here. I started school in January. I know one of the major things that they're trying to do now in terms of organizing and being able to have more powers, they're trying to get nonprofit, I think it's CO3, CO31 status. They're trying to enforce it as a nonprofit community so that they're able to do more advocacy. I don't know if you want to add real quick.
I'll try to be brief. As Sarah said, it was just a one road that led into Rap Road back in the 30s and 40s when my family moved here. That whole road was that Sarah's talking about, Rap Road, was all of my relatives. They're all great aunts and uncles. My grandparents, their brothers and sisters, all built their homes. They would live with one family, as Sarah says, um, until as they tried to build their own homes. And I think there's probably maybe, the road is still on my family, and there's probably about, I'll say, about 28 homes still there. And
I just want to say, but the question that she had, she wanted to know like the advocacy thing, like the meetings that you and Aunt Bev have been going on.
What we've been doing is going to the board with. We've been meeting. The city is very much aware of this community, and that it was a hidden community until, as Sarah said, they built Washington Avenue Extension. Nobody even knew we existed there. And then it became prime real estate, and now developers are trying to take this land, which my family owns, relatives own, and as Sarah said, as some are dying off, and mostly their children are taking their homes, but for those that didn't, their developers are buying it, and then we have gone to the city hall in Albany and have when they go for board hearings for the right for zoning rights, we have gone there and forced us. I mean, as many as 20, 30 of us showing up at these hearings and testifying, explaining the importance and the sentimental value of this land. So they're listening to us, and they're saying they're not allowing the development to take place. And but it's because of the zoning board that's that have been supportive of us, knowing of our family history. And the road that closes also every year, it's a road that's owned by our family. It was my grandfather's road. It was part of his road. And so because of eminent domain, we shut it down for the weekend once a year during family reunion to let them know that we are not relinquishing that property, that road. The city has even actually offered to buy it. I hope I answered the question. I know I could be long-winded.
That and more. Yeah.
Oh,
How you doing? I guess I just want to say I think it's interesting how everything kind of tied in together.
Yeah.
We talked about cultural competency, talked about power and privilege, and then we had like an example of power versus privilege and fighting back against the system. But I guess I wanted to address something with cultural competency, understanding like who you are and what you bring into the room, because I felt like you were speaking as a social worker. You bring into the room your perceptions and your prejudices against other folks. So I just would want to know, like in a scenario when you say I have a Mexican Chinese person in front of me, so they mix together. You don't know how they view themselves. What would you say is the most important part of just that initial interaction as far as cultural competency?
I think when you're in front of a person and a Mexican Chinese, maybe there are not that many assumptions you're gonna make, or maybe there are, I don't know. But I think asking questions and like with any person that's sitting in front of you, we all always like just looking at the person, the clothes they're wearing, their color of their skin, the way they speak. You start making judgments and assumptions. And I addressed the point of culture and like how we do make assumptions on culture. So being aware of that we are making those assumptions, I think it's a good start. And how do you address it when you're sitting in front of that person? Well, be aware of how you're making those assumptions. Like I think it's awareness of yourself, of what's coming up for you. And I think that's a tricky thing, and it's not easy, and it's a daily like personal work. I don't know if that's answering the question.
Well, yeah, it's just more because how that person self-identifies, I think, is very important. Because
Yes.
I knew a person that has a odd mixture in their DNA. I'll just put it that way. I don't know. Odd mixture in their DNA, but where they relate and what they present as problem, I think, is probably most important because sometimes you could be a young African American from Bed-Stuy, but you don't feel like you fit in. So I guess as I was looking at cultural competency, really you could have your prejudice, but then that person comes and they say, well, I don't feel like I fit in. So it really is whatever they present a problem is that is the most important part of that interaction.
Yeah, and I think like I just touched the surface of it, and like I agree with you. I'm Mexican. I am a dual citizen. I grew up in Mexico, and I'm living here now. And when I say Mexican, there's certain things that like are like there are assumptions made, and like maybe there's like the Latino caucus. The Latino caucus gets together and has meetings, and I don't feel part of it. I don't feel I relate. So I understand what you're saying. Like there's certain things that you need to see each person as how that person identifies. Yeah.
Any other questions? We've got, can you, okay.
So I know like maybe it's just hitting home for me today, but today's Yom HaShoah. It's Holocaust Remembrance Day. It started last night, goes through tonight. And maybe it's just something that's why it's on my mind. But I always like have a interesting feeling of how do you address cultural competency with maybe a religion that is not something you can see as much on the surface. You know, like how do you like today for a lot of Jews will be like a difficult day. Like I come from a family that has survivors in it, so it's a weird like day because if you go with your day and then you're sort of like okay, like you remember something really sad that happened to a large group of people. It wasn't only Jews. You know, how do you address something and be culturally like that's always the thing I run into is how do you address something, you know, that maybe isn't so much on the surface with someone, you know, and everything. Like how do you get to that with someone?
Well, I guess that's part of why I spoke about cultural competency, because what does that really mean? And how do we become culturally competent? And can we become culturally competent? There's so many different aspects to it. And like, as you say, like, today is a hard day for certain people because of what you're saying, but maybe a lot of people don't know. And if you're sitting with a client in front of you, you need to explore that and see what that means to that person. And if you're working in a community to develop a program, then you need to see what community you're working with and what things that community has in common, what they don't. Because maybe you're going to deal with it in one way and someone else is going to deal it in another way. But there's certain things that will be in common because of that cultural background. So I'm like bringing up the question of how do we do that? Because like I don't have the answer. Yeah.
the way I answer that question for my experience right now. And I definitely don't have the answer. I'm trying to like learn it, but in my internship this year, that's like everything I'm learning. I'm in an Jewish Orthodox agency, so I've been immersed, and every day is like a cultural competency like lesson. Like literally, I was in a different placement in the beginning of the year, and I was learning like how to be a clinician. Now it's like how far do I have to stand apart? Like what happens if my yarmulke falls off? Like all I think about all day long is like don't put out my hand to shake someone. So I have to literally reprogram myself to be a good member in the community that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like what you said, the first thing you said is that as social workers and students, it's our job to just kind of, come to the table and do our best, even though we might have this like preset of judgment, like, oh, you're wearing I don't know what color that is, gray or whatever, green. Oh, people who wear green are helping sad. I don't know. Maybe I think that. Whoops, stuff. But it's my job to then, like, I guess, hold that and be like, okay, well, let's meet her and let's see where she's at. Is she happy today? And just like do that opposed to putting my stuff on what I think about. So I think that's like my way of like trying to
Like
not-
exploring.
Yeah, like not jump the gun.
Yeah.
One more question.
We have time for one more question, or okay, 2 more questions. We'll go back there.
I want to thank everybody for sharing today, and I wanted to ask Sarah and about the beginning of that process and what were the first steps that started you on this collective power-seeking journey, and what lessons do you think that holds for other places where similar issues are happening, like Harlem right next door?
Yeah. I think additionally, and I can have my mom add into it, but it started with my great aunt Emma. She just started to do research on our family and our family history. I think there were a lot of questions in my family just about where we came from and how it came to be. Just the history of Rap Road has been passed down like orally, from generation to generation. But I think that, and then Jennifer Lamette getting involved, it just sort of evolved and developed into this whole thing with the book and advocacy for the community and keeping the community together. Like I said, I just moved to New York in January, so I'm not extremely familiar. I know that Harlem has a lot of things going on there. I think one of the things that I'll say, like we've discussed in class, there's been debates over things that are going on in Harlem, the development, where, it's like people want to come in and make it better and do all this stuff and develop it, but then at the same time you have to, you want to make the community better, but you still have to preserve what was there, that legacy, that historic, part of it. And I know there's a lot of issues going around too around Columbia being so close to Harlem, and some people actually considering Columbia part of Harlem and taking over. So I think it's, that balance. I'm really into like community. I did some community research in my undergrad, and I think going out into the community and asking people. So instead of us just coming in and telling you what you need, why don't we find out what you want? Just like with Rap Road, having our family have input in the development. Okay, so you bought this land. We, would ideally like to keep it in the family. We haven't. Well, at least let us have some input on what you want to do with it. Let's come up with it together and build it together. Yeah.
Okay, we've got our panelists waiting outside, so unless there's a really burning question, we're going to give a round of applause for our student presenters.